I'm delighted to welcome to the Unicorny Project Professor Ben Bensaou, who we came across actually just after we'd interviewed Geoffrey Moore.
All right.
And for 20 years, being a technology marketer, I've been investigating the world of disruptive or discontinuous innovation, believing that that was where new ideas came from, and suddenly it hit like a freight train. Realised there's this whole other thing going on. So I bought the book, Built to Innovate, which Professor Ben had written, and it's a fabulous book. Really very well worth reading, so full of inspiration and very accessible. And at that stage, we knew we had to get Ben onto the pod. So it's really nice to welcome you today. Welcome to Unicorny.
Well, thank you, Don. And thank you for having me. I'm really excited about sharing the ideas that came from the research and that I tried to codify into the book.
Yes, well, I mean, the book's a really good read, and it's full of examples of businesses that are doing this really well. Now, coincidentally, we were trying to look at the time in my day job, we were looking at how do we encourage our organisation to innovate. And we had set up a specific team to go and look at innovating. And now I realise actually the most successful companies, it's not one or two or three or four people that innovate or even one department. It's everybody. Maybe a good place to start. You detailed in the book a few companies who've done this really well. So maybe a good place to start, just to set some context, might be to look at those businesses that are doing a good job. Maybe a couple of examples.
Yeah, I can give you a couple of examples. I mean, maybe to start off, I'll just say what is really the theme of the book. This is really about introducing a new narrative on innovation, and I also show how you can, hardwire innovation into the DNA of a company. Just kind of to set the background. So I'm a professor at INSEAD Business School in Fontainebleau, near Paris. And all in all, I've spent 20 years doing research, teaching, and consulting on innovation. And what I primarily do is help organizations build their innovating capability, maintain them, and enhance them. During all these years, I've studied in depth, close to 100 organizations in the private sector and the public sector, in many different industries, from startups in the Silicon Valley, small and medium-sized companies, all the way to large industrial conglomerates. And I've come across some fascinating companies that were able to proactively transform themselves into major innovation powerhouses. And to my surprise, many of these companies were old, established companies operating in very traditional industries. And that's basically the reason why I wanted to write the book. I wanted to tell the story of these companies, to document some of the key insight, and as an academic, I wanted to codify what I had learned in the form of new concepts, new tools, and a structured methodology. So to give you a sense of what companies I'm talking about, let me give you a couple examples, and then we can develop from there the insights. So take Starwood, the global hospitality hotel company. A few years ago, they organized here in Paris a conference for about 700 of their frontline hotel managers. So we started by introducing them to some basic innovation concepts and tools. And then we divided the 700 people into 64 teams. We gave them, we were in Fontainebleau, so we gave them metro tickets, notebooks, and cameras. And we sent them out to roam the streets of Paris to try to capture images, experiences, and insights about their, ordinary travelers. They came back 3 hours later with some fabulous insights and ideas. They generated a total of 1,700 ideas. Now, many of these ideas were focused on, small incremental improvements to some existing process or service. However, among these, some became the foundation to some large global initiative that was launched by Starwood, just like this new marketing program, which they call Famtastic. This is a program to create special family packages based on research done on what kids want from a great hotel experience. Now, to be clear, none of these 700 people were specialists of innovation. However, each of them realized that by simply stepping away from your daily work routines and immersing yourself in the life of your customer, that simply opened up floodgates of fresh ideas.
What I think is really interesting about the Starwood example is, and fantastic, is that whole idea, which became a global campaign, could easily have come from one very simple insight that someone on that team had that normally would have been completely overlooked. But
absolutely.
Because you've set a process up for harnessing all those little ideas, put them together, and suddenly there's the spark of something globally that could make a competitive advantage.
Absolutely. But for me, what was really fascinating, and this is how I kind of build up the whole thinking and the new narrative about it, is that these were non-innovation specialists. These were people who, by simply focusing, even if it were for like a couple hours, actually immersing themselves in the life of their customers, actually they saw a lot of interesting. I mean, either it was pain points or things that the customers liked, or some dreams of the customers. So this is really to illustrate the fact that in an organization, anybody can generate ideas. I'll come back to this notion of innovation and innovating, but the one thing we can say is that by allowing everybody in an organization, and remember that anybody in an organization has a customer, whether it's an internal customer or an external customer. So if you give them, and I'll come back to this at length, I suppose, if you give them permission, which was what the exercise was doing, right? Sending them in an experiment, sending them in Paris, and asking them, begging them to look at their customers with open eyes and just bring back the experience. Just bring back images, photos, what you've heard, and they realized that they could. I mean, anybody. I mean, these people were just frontline hotel managers. And just to highlight another example, and then we can build up maybe some of the thinking. So this is the story of Fiskars. Fiskars is a 400-year-old.
This is a great story.
This is 400-year-old company, a manufacturing company based in Finland. They're well known for their iconic orange scissor. Yeah. Many people might relate to that one, but they manufacture cutting tools, tableware, outdoor equipment for gardening and other uses. And this is a great example for me of an old company, right? An old company that was able to enter an entirely new market, an entirely new industry, thanks to their, very methodical, continuous, and systematic approach to innovation. So the example I like to give is they wanted to better understand the needs of their customers, in particular their gardening customers. So they wanted to, what we call in design thinking, what we call the job to be done. So they wanted to understand the job to be done by home gardeners. So they conducted an in-depth ethnographic exploration focusing on gardening customers. So they looked at the entire journey, what happens before, during, and after customers use Fiskars tools. And they made a significant discovery. They realized that watering was an essential task in the journey of home gardeners. And they also recognized that they themselves had the design capabilities and the technologies to develop a highly differentiated solution to the watering problem, a solution that none of the existing players in the watering business, in the hose business, could think of. And as a result, instead of using the traditional, conventional wall-mounted rack used to store the hose, they developed an all-in-one portable device, which they call the water wheel. So this is a device fitted with wheels. It has a 300-degree range of movement, and it's fitted with all sorts of accessories that you can use for various uses, like if you want to irrigate a plot for a long period of time, or you want to set up a play area for the kids on a summer day. And the water wheel ended up winning many design awards, and it became a very profitable addition to Fiskars' product lineup. And this is only one of the many examples I saw at Fiskars of their continuous and systematic approach to innovation. So just to come back to your original question, these are representative examples. I've featured many more in the book, and we will get to those maybe in the conversation. And as a matter of fact, I'm still since the book was published, I've been engaged with other companies that are either trying to apply the same ideas or are doing the same thing without necessarily knowing it. But the question is really, what do these companies have in common? We're talking about hotel business, we're talking about cutting tools. These are very traditional businesses. And so how do we get better at innovation, in a sense? And this is when I tried to explain and rationalize what all these companies were doing, especially the type of companies these were, I realized that to get better at innovation, we need a different narrative. Genius-led and disruptive innovation is great, but it's very hard. It's very hard. Not every company can be a Tesla or Amazon or Apple. I think we all get it.
Yeah.
And this is why I wanted to introduce a different narrative on innovation, a different way of thinking about innovation. And first, I wanted to, tackle at least 3 common myths that I've encountered when doing my research or teaching innovation. The first one is that innovation is all about innovation superhero. But as I just showed you, this is not true. Innovation is for everybody. Innovating skills can be learned, just like the Starwood frontline hotel managers. So innovation, anyone can innovate, basically. The second myth that I encountered is that innovation is all about big bangs, breakthroughs, disruptions. And here again, just with the example of Fiskars, we can see that there's another story about innovation. Innovation is not only about big bangs and breakthroughs and disruption. There's another way to be innovative. And Fiskars was able to enter an entirely new industry thanks to its continuous and systematic approach to innovation. And just to highlight one third one, and then actually I have a couple other pillars to this new narrative. But let me highlight the third one. The third one is really that innovation is all the domain mainly of senior leaders or a set of internal specialists in R&D or new product development. But we saw with Starwood or with Fiskars that everybody can get involved in innovation. Innovation comes from the whole organization. And this is really what the new narrative I wanted to bring forward is that I'm not questioning that innovation, some part of innovation comes from some let's call them geniuses for the time being, or superheroes, people who have this great insight. Or that you have, some specialist. So I wanted to suggest that there's another way to think about innovation and highlight, put the spotlight on this part of the economy, which is actually quite significant part of the economy, where we don't pay attention to it because we glorify disruption, we glorify the superhero of innovation, but in fact, there's a whole part of the economy altogether where there's a lot of innovation going on, and this is more my target, if you will. I'm trying to address all of these organizations, small and medium-sized or large, old organizations that want to become more innovative. And this is really what the work has been about.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I mean, the work is amazing, and I think very, very enlightening. I think, for our audience, which is primarily senior marketers, I think they consider marketing to be the seat of innovation in an organization. And until I came across your work, on this podcast, I was saying, well, marketing with the innovation hub of any business. I see we're not, of course. And in the book on Fiskars, you give a very specific example of how warehouse and drivers are innovating and changing process and the way things are done. So I get that it's something that happens right from the very top to the very bottom of an organization.
I mean, I can say it in a different way. I can say it truly when I hear, when I talk to marketeers. I mean, innovation is all about coming from marketing, and you can see that one of the central, actually, another pillar of the new narrative, is that these innovative organizations that I've studied. In these organizations, innovation does not happen only inside out, internally. It happens, outside in.
Okay.
Looking at the customer, trying to uncover and address needs of the customers. And for me, this is the essence of marketing.
Yeah.
So I could almost reverse the whole conversation and say, everything is about marketing. It's about, to a certain extent. When I actually look at some of the best people who are able to capture what I call the voice of the customer, or even better, the silence of the customer, I realize it's very often salespeople. Salespeople have a keen capability at listening and observing the customer, very often with a lot of empathy. So for me, it's almost, if I wanted to exaggerate, is almost making everyone in the organization a marketeer in a sense, in the essential role of listening to the customer. And the only thing I'm doing is basically saying the customer can be many different types of entities, in a sense. I mean, it could be an internal customer, it could be an external customer, it can even be a process. A process has customers, a function has customers. But the mindset, if you will, is very much a marketing mindset.
Yes. I was interested in the book about the concept of non-customers, which you've alluded to.
Yes.
Here, because generally people tend to think about customers and they think about the person that writes the check, who buys the service or the product. But the concept of a non-customer is just as important.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about
Absolutely.
non-customers.
So this is, I mean, you might be aware of the work that one of my colleagues, I mean, a couple of my colleagues at INSEAD, Chang Kim and Ray Morborn did, which was called Blue Ocean Strategy.
Yeah.
And one of the techniques and tools that they had developed, which I simply kind of embraced and applied it not only to strategic leaders, but also to the front line, is to not only look at your direct customers, people who are actually entertaining a relationship with you right now, but people who are non-customers. I mean, these people could be in your own industry. I mean, I can give you an example, a quick example people might relate to. Nintendo is a fantastic example of that. Nintendo started, and people of our generation might relate to that. They started with something called the Game Boy.
Yeah. I remember it well.
And so once you saturated the market for Game Boys, they started to wonder who could be our next target. So they kind of, I mean, I'm doing it figuratively. They asked themselves, so Game Boy. So what should be our next target? And if you say Game Boy,
it's going to be girls. Yeah.
So this was a non-customer group. This was not a group that was targeted by the gaming industry. So they just asked themselves, we are all competing for the same pool of customers, which is the boys. So they did some research and found out that actually girls could be very interested and were interested in games, but they didn't have anything that was catering to their kind of sensitivity. And then, of course, the story goes on. So the whole industry becomes, very successful. It invites competitors. So then you have like big giants like Sony, and then of course, we have Microsoft coming in, and now there's the competition starts to escalate. You have much more sophisticated games, better sound, better visuals, and of course, Nintendo cannot compete with that level of technological, investment that is needed. So at some point, instead of trying to compete for the more ferociously for the gamers, the people who are interested in heavy duty gaming, they looked somewhere else. And this is where they started to focus not on individual gamers, but on families.
Yeah.
And this is where we had the Nintendo Wii.
Very smart.
Very smart. So
very smart.
This is an example of non-customer.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they kept pushing the boundary once they had reached, and Nintendo Wii was very, very successful. Then now they're targeting, when you think about it, this is something the exercise, and I do this in the classroom. You can logically find that the next stage is going to be elderly people. So now they are actually selling Nintendo Wii versions in nursing homes to create this very friendly environment where people are playing and doing exercise at the same time. So this is actually a very primitive way to look at non-customers, because you're looking at your target customers. You look at people who are, as I call them, soon to be lost.
Okay.
It's people who are sitting on the edge of your industry, and basically it wouldn't take a lot to displease them and get them to jump ship. They would just jump ship to another industry or another alternative, to satisfy their needs. But then you can also start to look at another bigger population, which is people who are in another industry, but are very unhappy with it.
Yeah.
So what could you do? What ideas could you generate and think of and develop and test to maybe attract those people? And then, of course, you have the big mass. When we look at many different industries, we realize that the competition is competing for 20% of the general population, and it's 80% that is completely ignored. that people who don't know about what the industry does. So this is also another pool of non-customers. But there's another way also to look at non-customers. It's not about people who are in your industry or people who are in another industry, but it could be people. It could be even within the your customer, for instance. If you think about B2B, very often companies focus on, let's say, the purchasing department or the engineering department. But now the same question is, if you're looking for a new idea, try to look not on, I would call it the red space, where you usually spend a lot of your time targeting people, but look at another maybe area where you don't necessarily look very often. So look maybe at the HR department. Listen to the accounting department. They might have an interesting idea. I mean, I have an interesting example of that. If you would be interested,
I definitely would. I'll tell you why. So I'm slightly obsessed with the whole blue ocean thing.
Okay.
We did a whole podcast on it. Actually, we talked about how JetBlue did exactly that. They looked at non-customers and they looked at non-competed for routes and built a whole business around it. And I was fascinated in the book that again and again you came back to talking about those being ideal tools to look at, to work with teams to get them to innovate. And I'd like to come back to that later. But tell me first, let's talk through the example.
Oh, you want to hear about the example?
I do,
Okay, so
this
is Philips.
Okay.
Philips, the Dutch manufacturing company, and this is the story about the industrial lamps business. So. So these are lamps that they sell globally to large manufacturing companies for warehouses or large companies for their office buildings. Now, to set the context, so this is the case of the American market. To set the context, we need to understand that in the US at the time when they developed this new product, when you are a client and you want to get rid of lamps that are not working anymore, you have, before you throw them in the environment, you have to extract the mercury that is in the lamps. So there's a whole industry, around that, helping companies extract the mercury before they can throw them in the environment. Now, Philips, as we know, has a fantastic R&D capability, and they were very proud of developing a totally new lamp, which they call the Alto, which was free of mercury.
Okay.
Now, fantastic, great lamp, free of mercury, but slightly a bit more expensive. So they organized a campaign to go and sell the lamp to their major clients in the US. So they prepared the slides, the samples, the presentation, and they went knocking at the doors of their big customers. And of course, where do you sell? Whom do you sell industrial lamps in large corporations? Well, I mean, it's usually centralized purchasing departments or data processing departments, but it's a central function. And of course, when you go and tell them, we have a great lamp, there are only two questions that they're interested in.
I already know one of them. How much, right?
How much? And of course, connected to it, how long does the lamps,
how long does it last,
So they went on, knocking at doors, making their presentations, and as soon as the key question came out, they were walked out of the door. So then they decided to actually give up. They gave up the whole campaign in the US, and they came back and then they reflected and they realized that they should use a different approach. So they completely scrapped the whole thing and they developed a new campaign where now they would go not to talk to the central purchasing department, but they would actually talk to the CFOs.
Okay.
And now the approach was very different. They would come in and say, okay, here's our lamp. This is how great it is. And this is the total cost of buying our lamp. Yeah. And this is the total cost associated with buying the lamps for our competitors, including the extraction of the mercury.
Yeah.
And then there was no debate. Right? And they're starting to have, lots of requests. And they went one step further. They started to go knock at the door at the time of, I think it was PR department, engaged in sustainability.
Yeah, makes great sense.
What I'm trying to explain is that in B2B, for instance, this is an example of B2B, people are so obsessed with their existing customer or target that they don't realize that they could actually develop an idea that could create value for somebody else. I mean, again, there's no real guarantee. So, again, I'm just trying to highlight that there are different ways to think about non-customer. I like to call it non-customer space because people always think that non-customers is individuals, but it could be non-customer space. It could be looking at your customers in 20 years, for instance. It could be, looking at not the functional aspect of your products, but maybe the emotional aspect. So it's all about whatever you're focusing on. I mean, this is the usual expression, think outside the box. So once you understand what is the box, then it's just a question of looking beyond that. And of course, the out of blue ocean strategy, and I included this in my new 7-step methodology, there are systematic ways to actually scan the environment looking for non-customer space. And this participates to building a set of tools, techniques, and structured processes for everyone to innovate. I mean, why this is important? I mean, the way I came to this, by the way, as now I've alluded to it, I came into it from the blue ocean strategy angle. And a lot of my initial activity was on blue ocean strategy and was working with very senior level people. But of course, you quickly realize that just like finding a disruption, finding a blue ocean is not hard. It's hard. It's very hard, and to a certain extent, it requires special consulting. It requires special skills, special people. So what I ended up doing is actually moving the ideas and the tools not to target senior leaders, but actually middle managers and even better frontline people.
Okay.
And then I discovered that if you give them some very simple tools, and these are very simple, intuitive, very often very visual tools, then at their level, they can find a lot of ideas. And then if you start to connect these ideas or to allow people to look for new ideas, you might end up with very significant innovations, as I like to call them, the way that I was describing, for instance, what Fiskars did or what other companies did.
Wow. There's a lot here. I feel like we need to take just a step back.
I mean, a word I like to use for this movement from focusing on senior leaders to allowing the front line, giving them permission to innovate, but also giving them some of the tools and techniques to do it, is what I call democratizing. Having a democratization of innovation. And for me, the logic, again, is I like to call it the law of larger numbers. I'll come back to it maybe. For me, innovating, I mean, not innovation, I'll come back to the distinction. Innovating is about looking for new ideas. And it's a game of large numbers. The more ideas you have, everything else being equal, the more opportunities you will have to maybe hit a great idea. So how do you increase the number? Well, logically, you involve more people. Not only the few specialists or the people who we often think are maybe the most creative people, but that's not necessarily true. By the way, I discovered It's not always those who think who are the most creative. You increase the places where you look for innovation. You can innovate in everything you do. Of course, in your products, in your technology, but you can innovate in your processes. You can innovate in your functions. You can even innovate internally, externally. And then there's the question of how often.
Yeah.
And you don't need to wait for a crisis to start to worry about innovation. I mean, innovation, you can innovate as a habit. I call it as a habit, continuously, on a systematic level. But then we can get into how you do that. But the intuition is there. These organizations that I observed, that I studied, became innovation powerhouses because they gave permission to the front line to innovate, to get engaged in innovating activities. Then they managed to channel these ideas, to sometimes combine them. They gave these people the tools to be able to innovate because, anybody can innovate. I mean, this is a big discovery for me. I mean, it's not a discovery, but it was nice to validate it empirically. And then these companies have a wealth of ideas that they can tap from. Now, the challenge is how do you make sure that the ideas keep coming, but then you have to channel them, select them so that they can become, innovations.
I was going to say that you in the book, you detail a framework, I guess, 3 roles, 3 processes, a way of harnessing not just the development of ideas for their own sake, but also how that then infiltrates the management of an organization. And you've got the 7-step method as well. So let's take a quick step back.
Yeah.
Do you normally do roles or processes first?
Well, maybe actually this is interesting. Either way, but I think we can start with the processes.
I was going to say, let's talk about the process.
By setting up the stage. I mean, the distinction, because here again, one challenge to look for new ideas. And of course, you want to make sure that some of these ideas become innovations, great innovations. So this is where many of the things that I came up with in the research in the book were serendipitous. It was total accident, and one of them is this conceptual distinction I make between innovation and innovating. So it came because one thing I had noticed talking about innovation to people around the world, actually, it's not necessarily cultural, is that the word innovation itself is very intimidating. It tends to generate a sense of anxiety and stress for many people, in particular people who are at the front line. The other thing also I had kind of noticed is that when people come to innovation training at INSEAD, for instance, they assume that their boss expects them to come up with the next breakthrough product or to uncover a new market space. Yeah. And I feel that they feel the pressure. The pressure is on, and they feel it, and they hate it. Yeah. So now, again, accidentally, having noticed this kind of typical reaction, now I don't use the word innovation when I teach. Instead, I refer to innovating, or I simply use the word to innovate. And then something really curious happens. Suddenly, the sense of fear and tension disappears in the room when I'm teaching. And the reason I think is that innovating does not imply any specific outcome or result. I mean, it's a verb. So typically people associate the verb with an activity. We're doing innovating. Yeah. If you walk into a room and you say, okay, we're going to learn how to do innovation, and people think that the boss is expecting a product, that's what it freezes them. It literally freezes people. But if you say, we're just doing innovating activity. So they associate it more with an activity, an action, a process, a set of behaviors, basically, and attitudes that anyone can learn. After all, how would I say? The way I define it, I say innovating, and I just mentioned it earlier. For me, innovating, I mean, the idea again is to lower the bar so that people don't have this emotional fear of it. So it's really a motivational issue. I try to lower the bar so that people feel comfortable engaging. So I define it as innovating is simply looking for new ideas. Looking for new ideas doesn't mean that you'll find them, but you just have to keep looking for new ideas, test them, develop the best ones, with no guarantee that you'll find some. And I think this approach, in particular in the classrooms, gives permission to everyone in the room to try their hands at innovating. You know, after all, I don't know about you, Don, but very few of us are geniuses who can produce breakthrough insights on command. However, getting involved in some innovating activity doesn't require any special talent. I mean, innovating, I can certify to it actually. I mean, innovating can be taught. It can be supported by, we discussed it, with tools, processes, techniques, and structured processes. So for me, the focus is not innovation, is innovating. I mean, if it can speak to the audience also, I use the familiar metaphor of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so if innovation is the tip of the iceberg, the impressive peak, rising above the water level, then innovating represents what's happening beneath the surface. It is where all the collective individual capability of the organization lies, and this is where it is simply waiting to be tapped, to be leveraged. So this is where I'm coming from. What I discovered in these organizations is that they had built this capability, innovating capability, and as I said, the way you do this is by engaging everyone. So the focus here is on the innovating capability, and the way you do that. And this is the pattern that when I looked at these organizations and how did they develop this innovating capability, it didn't happen simply by senior leaders, making statements that innovation is important or giving special funding to some special units. No. They created what I refer to as an innovating engine. They created a very concrete, fully legitimized, fully protected space and time within the organization where every employee had the permission to innovate. They were giving, of course, the tools and the training and the support to look for new ideas. So I think this is where I started to observe and try to look at this space, which now, if we agree, let's call it innovating engine. But this is very important. This is a very concrete space. So how is this space structured? Now we're getting to how is this space structured? And what I found out is that the way this innovating engine. So let me maybe step back just a minute and describe how an organization works. I mean, we're all very familiar with organizations and their structures and their processes, but without really paying attention to it, what we describe very often is what I call the execution engine. This is the bulk of the organization.
Yeah.
This is the engine that is focused on implementing the strategy of today, right? So the innovating engine, when I was able to observe it and document it, is an engine that is focused on building I would call it the strategy of tomorrow. This is where the companies imagine, tests, develops, tries to sometimes prototype the products, the services, the processes of the future. Now, what is really interesting is that I found that these two engines operate parallelly, simultaneously. So this means that every employee, of course, most of their time, even in some of these organizations, can be 95%, 90% of their time is focused on the job they hired to do, which is to execute. And these tasks are very well structured. We have processes to do that. We have KPIs to monitor that. But these employees, they are also given permission, and they're very much encouraged to spend some time. And what is important, as I might explain later, is that this time is structured, is protected, and it is regular. But they are allowed to spend some time engaging in some form of innovating activity. Remember the Starwood example. It just took of course, it was 3 hours because we had 700 people. But any frontline person can spend 30 minutes, let's say every 2 months, spending some time immersing themselves in the life of their customer. That counts for innovating activity. Looking at the customer, it's not easy to do, and we can come back to it. Looking at a non-customer and then reporting back. That is innovating activity. Getting involved as, let's say, an HR person joining the team, an innovation team, to add to the diversity of a real innovation project, that is innovating. So what I'm talking about is really, I saw that frontline employees were not only encouraged, but there were like very specific structures, processes that would allow them to get engaged in these innovating activities. And this is so I want to make sure that we understand that this innovating engine is very well, is concrete. It's a concrete thing. It's not just a concept. And it is as concrete as the execution engine. So what I started to discover is that just like the execution engine, right, we have a whole literature, we have a whole vocabulary, language to talk about the innovation, the execution engine. So we talk about its structure, we talk about its processes, we talk about its culture. And what I found out is that the innovating engine, however small it can also be described in terms of its governance structure, its underlying processes, and its distinctive culture. And this is where, again, to come back to your question, I'm sorry it's a bit long-winded, but I found that innovating engines have a governance structure, they have processes, and they have a structure. So the processes, so we're all familiar with even sometimes without seeing it that way, but execution engines are very often defined and operate with very structured processes. We're all familiar with the strategy making process, the budget and reporting process, the accounting and control process, many reporting or operational processes. So these are all processes that define and regulate the execution engine. So I started to look at all of these companies and how they were operating their innovating engine. And I discovered that they also have a governance structure and they also have processes. And the three processes that I uncovered was, first one is what I refer to as the creation process. I mean, this is the innovating engine, so this is really about generating, you remember, it's about generating ideas.
Yeah.
So the first process is, how does the organization generate these new ideas that we're talking about? Remember, it's just generating new ideas on a continuous and systematic basis. Now, the integration process, the second process, so creation, integration, reframing. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. The integrating process is the process by which the organization connects these ideas, which might be dispersed across the organization. How do you connect these ideas? How do you connect them to other innovators? How do you connect them to resources? And of course, another major part of the integration process is, how do you review the ideas? Somebody comes up with an idea at the front line. How do you review it? How do you channel it? How does it move into, usually it's a funnel, stage gate type of funnel. How does it move through the funnel to be tested, to be sometimes prototype? How do we, maybe pilot test some of the best ones? And the very best ideas are selected to then move into the execution engine. So this is where you have the interplay between the innovating engine that generates ideas.
Yeah.
You have a process by which they are, funneled and channeled, prototype tested, and some of the best ones then move to the execution engine. And this is when we move from innovating to innovation. Because a great idea that gets implemented correctly becomes potentially a great innovation. So this is the interplay between the two engines. So now you asked me the question. So this is the processes, and we can come back to them if it's needed. The other really important finding for me, it was even surprising to me, is this notion that in these highly innovative, old and traditional organizations, everybody was getting involved. Whether you were frontline employee, middle manager, or senior leaders, I detected that they all had a role to play and a contribution to make to all three processes: creation, integration, and reframing, with, of course, different ways to play that role. So this is where, again, to come back to your question, I discovered that innovating and building the innovating engine resulted in creating three processes where three roles. Everybody in the organization had a role to play, and I can develop a little bit about some of these roles and actions and what each of these different roles can do. But I think this is what I call the build to innovate framework. Basically, this is a very action-oriented framework to help any kind of organization. I didn't mention it because we're talking mostly to private companies, but these ideas and these frameworks, and I have some examples featured in the book, apply as well to public organizations and government agencies. So this is really generic. So the framework gives it's very action-oriented. It gives a set of actions, decisions, processes that organizations can put in place to build their innovating engine from scratch.
A role that's often overlooked, which is essential in your framework, is that of the middle manager. So everyone thinks about the front line where ideas are generated, all the senior leaders who are going to be involved then in helping doing the reframe. Talk to me about the importance of the middle management.
I think the middle managers, that was Dom, that was really the biggest surprise for me in the research I think most people would have known it, but it was not really documented as much. But I realized that middle managers are essential to innovation. They play a pivotal role. I mean, without them, innovation just gets lost, and they're very often overlooked, as we know. So this is why I kind of call them the forgotten heroes of innovation. And what is really interesting is that essentially, in the whole organization, they are responsible for execution. I mean, they are the ones who are responsible for execution, making sure that execution happens properly. They're not necessarily trained in innovation, and they don't have the same, how would I say, direct pressure, external direct pressure for innovation. I mean, we know frontline, whether they're given permission or not, that's a different story. But for them, innovation is natural, because they are the ones who are facing customers and non-customers on a daily basis, and they can experience, they can smell the pain points, the wishes, the dreams of the customers. They hear that, they see that all, So innovation, I mean, I very often, when I do some audit with some companies, I realize, and senior leaders are always very surprised, that the front line is very eager to innovate, and they have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
The only problem is that they don't feel that their ideas are desired. I mean, they have resistance, and they even sometimes, in some cases, get punished, if not discouraged, to actually push too much on innovation. Now, the senior leaders, I mean, they're the ones who are looking at the survival of the company, and for them, I mean, innovation is an imperative. They understand that the only way to survive, I mean, I'm not going to go through all the terrible pressures that they're facing with technology, competition, climate change, and everything. So for them, innovation is an imperative. But the middle managers, they're the ones who are squeezed in the middle, and they don't have this external pressure.
Well, they're also the stewards of execution. They're in place to execute the strategy and the business.
Yes.
So the natural inclination might be that middle management is not there to innovate, actually is there to execute.
Absolutely.
But that's wrong.
Well, I mean, they're there to execute.
Of course, they're there to execute as well. Sorry,
No, I mean, I when I was doing Blue Ocean training, I used to kind of make sure to temper people's excitement, not only because I knew that it was not easy to do, but also to kind of remind people that you can spend a lot of time trying to imagine the future, but if you don't defend your business of today, and you won't be there. So you see the whole framework here is really that you have to not lose your execution engine. The execution is very important, but the idea is, how do you tap this additional latent capability that is embedded in your people, in your processes, in the rest of the organization? How do you tap that to imagine the future? So middle managers are definitely should be focused on execution. However, and by the way, even in my thinking, they're not the ones who are expected to innovate. I mean, as we said, they are shielded from the external pressure, but they are the ones who can give permission to the front line to look for new ideas and to bring these ideas. They are the ones who can support the front line when they need, politically, protect them politically. I mean, we can talk about what kind of structure you need to put in place to help the middle managers do that. But basically, they are the ones who need to give permission. They need to support, encourage the front line to bring these ideas. And interestingly, they are the ones who, in many organizations, are at the right level of elevation so that they can play this connecting role of connecting ideas and innovators to other departments, to resources. So I can give you a very, very quick example of the role of a middle manager, and I might actually highlight why it happened. So this is a story about a product called Basotec. This is BASF. This is the large global chemical company based in Germany. This is a story about Basotec. This is a foam-like resin that they sell to. This is used for soundproofing and insulating. They sell it to construction companies and to the automobile industry. And this is an innovation that happened totally by accident. So one salesperson, BASF salesperson, was on a call trying to sell Basotec foam to. It just happened to be a Japanese construction company. And then by accident, the salesperson kind of spilled a cup of coffee on the table, and it was spilled over the blueprints that were laid over the table. So in total kind of,
disaster.
panic, disaster. Yeah. So he just grabbed whatever he could, that was close on the table. It just happened to be a piece of Basotec foam, and he just, wiped the blueprint. Fantastico. The mess was absorbed, but was so the ink. He only realized later that he had discovered a quality of Basotec that nobody knew about, which is that when Basotec is combined with water, it becomes a very powerful stain and dye remover.
Okay.
So he took this to his boss, and his manager immediately put him in contact with the chemists at BASF. And then they launched a large systematic search into their database, customer database, looking for which customer could potentially be interested in a material with the kind of properties they had discovered. And it took them 2 years, and then they developed a R&D partnership with Procter & Gamble. And they developed a product now that is marketed everywhere called Magic Eraser, Mr. Clean, the famous Mr. Clean, Magic Eraser. I had to go back home to discover that we had it in the kitchen. It's present in a lot of kitchens. And when you look at it, it is simply a piece of Basotec foam marketed under P&G. It is one of the most successful innovations of P&G, and one of their most profitable business units. Now, why did this happen? This is the key. This is the result of an initiative that BASF had launched years before, which they called Perspective. And Perspective, and I spent quite a bit of time interviewing people at that small unit. Perspective was created as a separate central unit that would develop processes and techniques related to initially quality management, process development, and then it was innovation. And blue ocean strategy was one of the things that they were exploring at the time. But basically, they were people across BASF in customer orientation and innovation. And this is how waves of middle managers came together to receive this training, these tools, this new language. When I interviewed people, they were telling me that in the old days, that would have never happened. When the head of marketing just connected immediately to the chemist. I mean, in many organizations, traditional manufacturing organizations that I visit, very often the silo between marketing, R&D, the technical experts is very, very strong. So, but I want to insist on that. I mean, the story is a great story. It's another one of these post-it kind of stories.
Yeah.
Completely accidental innovation that becomes a big success. But it happened because of the role of the middle manager. So they were the ones who connected the innovators with the rest of the organization.
Whereas in a traditional organisation, by the time that got all the way up to the top and then started coming all the way down the tree in a different silo, it would be dead.
Yes.
So BASF had perspective, and Bayer has a program or platform called We Solve.
Yes.
Is that the way that organisations generally are harnessing?
So this is. I'm glad you asked this question. So just to come back to the logic, huh?
Yeah.
So I discovered this. All traditional organizations that were very innovative. And I was really curious to know why. And one of the reasons is that they were able to, tap and leverage the capabilities of everybody. Now, how did they do that? They created something very concrete, like structured, that I call the innovating engine. So we already talked about the processes that regulate this engine. But this happens within a structure. So the same way that the execution engine has a structure, a governance structure, and we're all familiar with the vertical hierarchy, the silos I was talking about between marketing and design and research, the very strong reporting and structured processes. Now, the innovating engine also has a structure, which is much more focused on delegation, collaboration, and horizontal networks. So Bayer is a very good example of a formal structure, formally structured innovating engine, if you will. So we're all familiar with Bayer. Did I say Bayer?
Bayer, yeah.
Bayer. I mean, now, Bayer has a long history of scientific achievements through their fantastic R&D capability. But it was really interesting to me to see that in 2014, the board decided to create what I ended up calling an innovating engine, an organization to tap, to leverage the capabilities of the 100,000 of employees they have within the company. So what did they do? First, and I will try to describe what are some of the 3 or 4 key components I saw at Bayer and BASF that can create the structure of an innovating engine. So first, they made the whole board responsible for innovation.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, they started with one person who was kind of Mr. Innovation for the whole board, and realized that it was not enough. So they made the whole board responsible for innovation. Then they selected 80 senior executives at a very high level across country groups and global functions to support the board. And they called them ambassadors. They were innovation ambassadors. And these innovation ambassadors spent most of their time with middle managers, advocating for innovation, getting them trained in innovation, sponsoring innovation, supporting some specific projects. And then BASF did something interesting. They trained and certified 1,000 innovation coaches who were then activated across the whole organization.
This is industrial scale.
So industrial scale. So they created, just like, I was talking about perspective at BSF, they created a central unit where, now coming back to the middle managers, if a middle manager had an individual or a group of people who had an interesting idea they wanted to develop, the middle manager does not know, is not trained for this, doesn't have the resources. But then they could call upon this central unit of coaches, of consultants, experts, internal projects, who would come and support the team in developing their idea. And of course, you can see the bootstrapping phenomena, because very often through this training, locally you would have somebody who likes the tools and likes the techniques and becomes, the innovation person in the organization. So I saw this, as I said, so Bayer had that, BSF had it. Samsung is very famous for its, they have actually a full building, I think it's in the south of Seoul, dedicated to that. It's called the VIP, Value Innovation Program Center, where they have a 4-story building housing experts of innovation, and any division who wants to develop a new product or a new idea, they would actually go and stay in the building.
I was going to say it's residential, isn't it?
It's completely.
I was fascinated by that in the book.
It's boot camp.
Yeah.
It's Korean style. It's a boot camp. I mean, different organizations have different. But the idea here is that, so you need to have, I call it the I committee, the innovation committee.
Yeah.
You need to have some sort of and we may come back to that, senior leaders who are responsible of innovation, and we can talk about what they need to do. Then you have like a central unit. Then you have this central unit of coaches and all that has also ramifications in the local organizations. And then, as you were alluding to it, Bayer did something very interesting. They created WeSolve. WeSolve is a digital platform where any employee within Bayer struggling with an issue can post on WeSolve and invite suggestions, ideas from anyone around the world. Now, what is really interesting about WeSolve is that when I interviewed them, they mentioned that at the time they had 40,000 people who had participated in WeSolve.
No.
Now, at the time, I think I saw the platform. It's in English, and they have 50,000 people who can speak English in the whole organization. So this was a very high level of
really high adoption.
But Dom, the most impressive statistic for me was when they explained that two-thirds of the best ideas that came on WeSolve came from a division or a function that was different from the one where the problem was posted in the first place.
Wow. Okay.
So this is really shows how they were able to tap the capability from across the organization.
And it's democratization of innovation in action.
In action, absolutely.
So we're running out of time, sadly, but you just alluded to it. There's one prerequisite that's really important if anyone's going to look at anything like this. And I would very strongly recommend all of our unicorners to read your book and do their own research. Talk to me about the need for a cultural transformation, because this has to be supported, presumably. And I think that's what you were alluding to just a minute ago.
Absolutely. I mean, again, when we say that the organization becomes an innovating and that everybody has to participate, it requires a cultural transformation. It requires a different way of thinking. It requires a different set of beliefs, of values. And the way you create a cultural transformation requires many elements. It is not simply about the senior leaders sending communication, and this is why the infrastructure is important. The processes are important, and this all participates into the new culture. How do you create a new culture? I'm a strong believer, having spent a lot of time looking at organizations around the world, and particularly in Japan, that you have, as a leader, as a manager, you have levers, and these are some of them are structural. So again, the role of senior leaders becoming, the people who put innovation at the center of corporate strategy, the people who give permission for people to innovate, the people who create the infrastructure, the units, create new roles, new tasks, new responsibilities. That is participating to create the new culture. The middle managers, as I was mentioning, are very central to that. Maybe just to also transforming the culture is a combination of a lot of things, and sometimes even very small things. And one of the interesting examples I saw of how a middle manager can, in a very subtle way, change the culture of his or her team. We're not talking about changing the culture. It starts with it starts with the team. Was this experience I had with a Japanese manager. His name is Mr. Iwashita. Actually, I met him first in, I think it was 2001 or 2, doing some training. At the time, it was not called Blue Ocean yet.
Yeah.
It was called Value Innovation. So I was doing some training with him, and I followed with him. I tried to kind of see how he was implementing some of the ideas and all that. And 6 months after the training, I went to visit him in Japan and see, if he had kind of come up with ideas and all that. It was very fascinating how they had developed some very nice new products. And I was really curious about how he did all this. But he said, very Japanese tradition, he never showed the tools. He never, did. Consultants and business school professors are not as popular in Japan as they are in the Anglo-Saxon world. But that's a different story for maybe another time. But what I discovered is that talking to his people, they didn't know about the tools, but they had noticed something really different about him.
Okay.
And the thing was that whenever it was subtle, and they had picked on it, that whenever he was, somebody came to him with a new idea or proposing an idea, which, in Japan is not something people do, naturally, culturally, he would systematically say, thank you. So I was really curious about this because I heard few people mention that. So I went to him and I said, and he mentioned that he did it very consciously. So I was very curious. What's going on? So he explained to me, and I thought his explanation is very powerful. So, by the way, to get people to innovate, you need to give them permission. They need to feel that you want their ideas, but also you need to also kind of tell them about how they can judge their own ideas on their own. So let's focus on the first aspect. Why does he say thank you? He said to me, he discovered that when people were executing their job, remember when they are in the execution space, in the execution engine, they know, usually their task is structured. There's a process, there's a, job description, there's even KPIs. So they know that their boss at any time can know if they're doing their job well or not.
Yep.
But then he said when it comes to innovation, there's no such visibility. You cannot know if somebody has an idea or not. I mean, there's no way. Some people can have a brilliant idea and never mention it to you for years. So he realized that that when people were coming to see him, in fact, when they did, they were taking a big risk.
Yeah.
And that is what was, I mean, in the culture, but I think it's true in many different places in the world. People, when they propose an idea, especially if it's kind of, a different idea from what people expect them, they're taking a risk. What is the boss going to say? Are they going to feel, people are going to feel that this is a stupid idea? I mean, so so he realized that whenever people came to see him with a new idea, they were taking a risk, which means that they were giving him a gift.
Okay.
And then he turned back to me and said, in my culture, when somebody gives me a gift, I say thank you. And I thought this was very brilliant, because it is and this is what I mean by creating the culture with small behaviors, small actions. Of course, there are big levels that we talked about, senior leaders, the processes, the structures, but at the very local level, small micro behaviors like this, just telling people thank you, it gives them a feel that not only you're giving them permission, but you're encouraging them, you're acknowledging them. And then, of course, he went even beyond by always following up with 2 questions. And maybe I'll just do this very quickly. And I thought it was also a very powerful way to do it, because, in fact, it is a tool in the toolkit that I have, but he never showed the toolkit. Instead, he would use questions. And I think this is another way, a powerful way for middle managers to set the culture, is by simply asking questions. Not, as I say, execution is about problem solving. Innovating is about problem finding. It's about finding problems, in the life of the customer or the non-customer. So it is very much about asking questions. So the 2 questions you would ask, so somebody would come and say, boss, I have a new idea. Yeah, thank you for bringing me this idea. But can you help me? Why would the customer like this idea? Can you help me? So in a very subtle way, he's prompting the frontline people to think customer first. You remember? Marketeers always think about the customer first. People don't do that naturally. They very often think about, the supplier side view. They don't think about the customer side view. So why would the customer like it? And if they don't know, he wouldn't start yelling at them. He would say, oh, why don't you take an hour and go and find out?
Yeah.
And then when people would come back, then he would ask his second question. And the second question is, what should be the pricing or the cost to the customer for us to, for this idea to be successful? And suddenly he was putting this notion that, you have to think about the value to the customer, but you have to also think about the value to the company. And I think with these 2 questions, very simple, he was creating a new culture.
Yeah.
Why I say new culture? Because it's a new language. And culture is driven by language. By simply, telling people, thank you, I want your ideas, but I want you to think about your ideas. Are they creating value for the customer? Why would the customer like it? Are they creating value for the company? So what would be the cost to the customer? And implicitly to us as well. And there you have, just by changing the language, you've created a new culture, I think. So culture transformation is very important, but it is a very multidimensional and very complex endeavor. And I think all the elements, in the structure, in the processes, are contributing to create this new culture.
Boom. Thank you.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Very good.
Makes enormous sense. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop us there.
Thank you.